Hello everyone, Oli here, and this is my review of The Arc of Infinity, the first story of the 20th season of classic Doctor Who starring Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor. The Arc of Infinity is the 124th story overall. It's 4 parts long and it's written by Johnny Byrne. As I said before in my previous video, sorry for the long delay, had other personal stuff to deal with which is mostly out of the way, so I'm back for the meantime. So here is the plot of this story. Travelling with Nyssa in the TARDIS, the Doctor is attacked by a malign entity, a being of pure antimatter seeking to cross the dimensions. Although the invader is successfully repelled, the TARDIS is immediately recalled to Gallifrey, where the High Council of Time Lords sentenced the Doctor to be executed to prevent any further attempts at bonding. It seems there is a traitor in Gallifrey, and what links the renegade and the disappearance of Tegan's consort in Amsterdam. Two fates intertwined must battle for the future of the entire universe. So that is the plot of Arc of Infinity. In my opinion, I think the Arc of Infinity is a very good story, a huge improvement in comparison to the last story, which was Time Flight, which was just utterly crap, which was probably one of the reasons why it pretty much discouraged me to continue with these reviews, to be honest. But it's a good story. It does have some problems, but it's not as bad as the problems in Time Flight. The production was quite good. The sets were not so bad. Gallifrey didn't look as impressive as it did in previous stories. It looked very grey and very confined, but they did make the best of it. They did make the best of it, but yeah, it did feel a bit like confined. And then the location filming was actually set in Amsterdam, and this is the second time Doctor Who was filming outside of the UK. The first time was in City of Death, and the second time and we were in Amsterdam, so it's pretty obvious that John Nathan Turner was trying to emulate the success of the City of Death into to making this story, which features characters pretty much running around Amsterdam. Although it wasn't as time consuming as the City of Death was. And fun fact, you can actually see John Nathan Turner in the phone booth, and I think it was in part 4 in the scene where the Doctor was talking to Nessa and outside the phone booth, and I think it's when the Doctor was asking Nissa for money, and then you can literally see like a guy with like shaggy hair, which is in the next phone booth, and that was John Nathan Turner trying to get people to get away from filming. The script was quite good, and the direction by Ron Jones was good also. And I thought the plot was also quite good as well. This story features the return of Omega, the last seen in the Three Doctors 10 seasons ago, and is supposedly back after being killed in an explosion. I like the plot of Omega returning and wanting to take some revenge on the Doctor, and in this season 20, as this is the 20th season, 20th anniversary of Doctor Who, at least every story in this season pretty much features an enemy of the Doctor's from the Doctor's past, and the episode 1, story 1 features Omega, and we'll see more villains coming up soon. And Gallifrey also returns with key characters such as Barusa and Castellan. The Matrix also returns. So, although I don't like how coincidental the story was with how Tegan and Colin being cousins, and how Colin and Stuart decided to squat in the church where the TARDIS happened to, where Omega was pretty much staying at, and cemetery, crypt, whatever, and then also how Omega pretty much landed his TARDIS in there, and then how, and of course Tegan wanted to surprise her cousin Colin in Amsterdam. The pacing was quite decent. There wasn't really any drag. It wasn't so bad, so to speak. Speaking of moments, I think there were some good moments in the story, especially in the beginning when Omega hijacked the TARDIS and bound himself to the Doctor's body. Omega abducting Colin, and the part 1 cliffhanger when the Doctor was shot upon arrival in Gallifrey. I also liked the scene where the Doctor was seemingly executed, but due to his bonding with Omega, he ended up getting trapped in the Matrix, and the other Time Lords are suspicious and I actually liked the fact when the Time Lords got a bit too suspicious that the execution went way too smoothly. They were thinking like, this is not, we're not expecting this to happen. I did like that aspect of it. So onto the performances, I think they were alright. Peter Davison was quite great. It was great in the story, and like other Doctors in the past, he actually does play 2 parts, and being the Doctor and Omega with the Doctor's body, because Omega took some of the Doctor's DNA, and And I think Davison did a good job as Omega as well. Even though that part didn't really last long, there was a scene where the Doctor, well, Pete Davidson Omega was like watching this street puppet show, and I think this is where I think obviously this is a story where it's pretty obvious that Davidson learned his mistakes from season 19 and is definitely vastly improved. And it's like onto the street performance with that puppet show when the kid was smiling at Omega and Omega gave one very awkward smile back. I did like that scene. It was quite interesting. And I think this is definitely the Doctor's DNA like coming up a bit because you know how good natured the Doctor is, and the Doctor will pretty much give off that energy, and that's how Omega was coming off. That's how that was pretty much Omega being influenced by the Doctor and the sorts. So, and I obviously like how confident Peter Davison is, and in the story, you can definitely see how happy he is in the story as well. And the Doctors with Nissa for at least a good portion of the story, the two seem to be working well as a duo, even though their chemistry isn't fully shown here because this story is very much a character driven story, but they do have a good rapport together, as we've seen in previous stories how well Nissa and the Fifth Doctor work together. And a good example of having these two having a good rapport was, I think it was the audio story. I think it's Spare Parts. I mean, even though they were pretty much split up for a good part of the story, but then they did have some good chemistry together. So I like that. And the scene. So as I mentioned before, I like the scene where the Doctor and Nissa are like outside the phone booth, and he obviously needed like money to talk to operate the phone booth, and then I liked how he was asking Nissa for money, and Nissa was just like, really. Speaking of Nissa, I think Sarah Sutton did a good job here as well, and obviously the Doctor and Nissa have been traveling alone for some time together, and Nissa is goes full badass in this, so even though it was quite out of character, but it was a very good brief change of character here because yeah, it's never actually shown again because I think Leela was meant to have been in the story, but then and I think Louise Jameson turned it down, so Nissa actually does like shoot down at least 5 or 6 Time Lords, and there's even a moment where she stares at this laser gun, stares at it as if she wants to like do some damage. It was just it was a very funny scene. It was very funny here as well. Here I was just seeing Nissa just randomly shooting down every single Time Lord she sees, and the Doctor didn't even do anything about it. And it does show, and I love this side of Nissa as well because it shows how fearless and protective she is of the Doctor compared to given obviously due to certain circumstances like Adric's death, it's hard to see why she's not so how she wants to protect the Doctor. She does cry when the Doctor is seemingly executed in part two, which shows that she does really care for the Doctor. And yeah, as I said, this is actually the last story where Nissa actually wears her Traken outfit because in her last three stories she actually does wear different outfits, and I think the reason for this change was because I think Sarah Sutton requested it as well, because and it's definitely nice to see that how she's actually changing her gear up a bit because she pretty much wore the same thing ever since she started traveling to the Doctor at the end of season 18. And Janet Fielding was good here as well. We don't really see Tegan until at least part two, and she doesn't properly reunite with the Doctor and Nissa until the last 5-10 minutes of the story. But she is placed in the Matrix by Omega to try and lure the Doctor into Amsterdam, and that's what pretty much happens. She doesn't really do a whole lot because she pretty much spends most of the story in the Matrix, but it is good to see Tegan again. So, since Tegan was left behind on Earth since in Time Flight, she lost her air stewardess job. She's pretty much been going through the motions and decided to meet up with her cousin Colin in Amsterdam to try and cheer herself up. But then she meets Robin Stewart, who's Colin's travel buddy, and then she learns that, and this is how she learns that Colin went missing. And but then her and Stuart pretty much get captured by Omega, and she's obviously used as leverage to try and get the Doctor into Amsterdam, so Omega can like fully bond with the Doctor. But then once Omega is defeated, she decides to travel with the Doctor again. And so this also and Tegan's also changing her outfits as well because she's lost her air stewardess job, so she's pretty much going around in civilian clothes, and so this new outfit of hers is her new, and this white ensemble of white shorts, a white t-shirt, and she's wearing like a white cardigan over it, and And she does wear this for at least the vast majority of the season, and I don't blame Janet Fielding for disliking this outfit. I think she even called this outfit the boob tube because it did look quite cold. She did look quite cold wearing it, and she was in very cold environment, and I don't think I would have personally liked that. And obviously she had to wear this for most of the season, and this was Jonathan Turner's rule for wanting female companions to have some form of skin exposed, especially showing off the legs with like the tiniest and tightest of skirts and the shortest of shorts in order to try and get the dads watching, so to speak. So on to the side cast. We have Colin Fraser, and obviously he's Tegan's favorite cousin. So he and his friend Robin Stewart were backpacking in Amsterdam, and they were trying to find a place to stay. And so they find this crypt, and then he hears something over the night, and then he's abducted and hypnotized by Omega. I like this character, and I thought he was quite funny how he looked when he was possessed. He had a very strange face he was putting, so to speak. And you also have Robin Stewart, who's Colin's travel buddy. And Stewart is the one that actually convinces Colin to stay in the crypto. They're looking to try and find a place to stay. And so when Colin disappears, he actually meets up with Tegan in the Amsterdam airport, and he tells Tegan what happened, and then the two later get captured by Omega. He was a good character also. And thirdly, we have Commander Maxwell. He's the Chancery Guard in Gallifrey, and he's very overzealous and loves his job, and he pretty much causes trouble for the Doctor and Nyssa. And he's played by Colin Baker, who we all know, who plays the Sixth Doctor later than like pretty much over a year after the story aired. Yeah, and I think this performance pretty much led him to be cast as the Sixth Doctor as well. And I think whilst I was doing research or other reviews for previous stories, and I think there were some roles that he was actually requested that they wanted him to be in, but then he turned it down. And so, but hey, he gets his big break finally. And we also have Barusa, last seen in the Invasion of Time, but he's played by Leonard Sachs this time. He's willing to prove the Doctor's innocence, and he's later framed for being the one that aided Omega, but then someone else was responsible, and we'll get to that later. And we have Catalan Jericho. He was responsible for the security on Gallifrey and answered to Barusa. He tried to kill the Doctor because of his bonding with Omega, but then he ended up working for the actual culprit. And he was actually a good character, but then and we actually see him again in the Five Doctors. And we have Damon. He's an old friend of the Doctor's, and he gave the Doctor proof that someone in the High Council stole the Doctor's biodata, which was the cause of Omega bonding with the Doctor. And he later aided the Doctor in escaping from Gallifrey to go to Amsterdam to save Tegan from Omega. And of course, we had Hedon, and a member of the Gallifrey High Council, and another friend of the Doctor's. He was the actual culprit that stole the Doctor's biodata and gave it to Omega to try and bond with the Doctor. And then he framed Barusa at the start for being responsible for working with Omega, but then he later sacrificed himself to save the Doctor, which allowed Omega to complete the bonding. And of course he had Thalia, who is a member of the High Council of Gallifrey. Of course, the villain was Omega. For those who are unaware, Omega was a key figure in Gallifreyan history, as he was one of the co-founders of the Time Lord Society, and then he moved to an antimatter universe, and he tried to use his world to build around his own antimatter universe. And in the Three Doctors, Omega wanted to find a way to escape, and wanted to use the second and third and first Doctors to try and make his plan work. But then it was revealed that the antimatter was literally like destroying his body, and his will was keeping him alive. And then he died in an explosion. And in this story, Omega had hidden steal the Doctor's biodata from the Matrix and hijacked the TARDIS to try and bond the Doctor's body and clone himself to try and enter our end space, whilst they being in control of a dimensional gateway called the Arc of Infinity. He had a creature called the Ergon to serve him, and Omega used the Arc to control the Matrix and made a body for himself, whilst using the Doctor's body The Doctor sabotages equipment, causing Omega to enter the physical universe, which was dangerous because the transfer was incomplete and his new body was starting to turn back into antimatter. And Omega, even after defeat, wanted to destroy the Earth, but the Doctor stopped this from happening. With the matter converter, Omega was quite good here, and well, not was pretty much the same. But at the same time, it wasn't really as well written as he was in the Three Doctors. He's now played by Ian Collier and Peter Davison. I did like the scene where Omega was trying to smell at a child during a street show, which pretty much indicates that he had something there still, but then yeah, it wasn't as good as it was in the Three Doctors, in my opinion. So the thoughts I do have with the story, the main one being how there was no explanation as to how Omega survived the explosion at the end of the Three Doctors, and how he even gained control of the Arc of Infinity. I think it just felt very circumstantial and just there. He was just there for the plot, so to speak. Also, Tegan didn't really do much of anything in the story as well, and as opposed to being used as leverage to try and get the Doctor to remain on Gallifrey, and the Doctor in this seemed, and obviously the Doctor in this seemed to have forgotten about her for most of the story until at least they reached Amsterdam and rescued her. The plot does falter a little bit in part 3, although it was a bit all over the place and it just started dragging not necessarily dragging, but it was just starting to be a bit like, so to speak. But I think the Arc of Infinity was a good story to kick off season 20 with a return to Gallifrey, the return of Omega, and the Peter Davison era seems to be in full gear at this point. And so I give the story an 8 out of 10. The next review will be Snake Dance, which features the return of the Mara and Martin Clunes in a very odd outfit. So thanks for watching. Please let me know what you thought of Arc of Infinity. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Like this video if you can. Spread the word if you can. And I'll see you later. Nice being back. Ta-ra.